Hey there, Feinics Nation! So, this is a very big deal for us because this is our first ever live recording of the Feinics Gate here at Hudson Valley Horror Fest. How we doing, everybody? Thank you, thank you. So it's Lavender here. Our Jade right now is at AnimeNYC, doing as we do. And I'm very excited to lead into Scarlet giving us quite an exciting topic this week.
Hi, what's up, guys? I am here to take a stab at the slasher genre.
There you go. Starting off strong with the puns.
I wish we had the shower scene stabbing like sound effects.
Isn't that how it goes? I think that's how it goes.
Yep.
But in all seriousness, Scarlet, can you tell everybody what we're going to be talking about today?
So yeah, we are going to be talking about the evolution of the slasher genre from its beginnings its true beginnings in the mid-'70s to how it's kind of become an elevated storytelling method today.
Very, very exciting. So, if we're going to talk about early influences, where would you say, Scarlet, it really started for the slasher genre? Because it's so well known now. Everybody knows a slasher. I mean, hello. We're Patrick Bateman and Ghostface here today. And let's ask the audience, who's your favorite slasher?
The Driller Killer from Summer Party Massacre.
Driller Killer? I'm so happy.
I love that for you.
That made my whole day because that was not what I was expecting to hear. Yes, the Feinics Nation has arisen for Driller Killer. But speaking on that, we wouldn't have these sensational characters without a starting point. So can you give us a little background on that, Scarlet?
Yeah. So a lot of people like to point to Psycho as one of the earliest examples of a slasher, which it is, a lot of people call it a proto-slasher nowadays after really sitting there and digging through just the horror genre. But one of the earliest examples that predates even Psycho is a movie called 13 Women. It came out in 1932. So this was way back in the day, like Hollywood, Hollywood codes up the ass era. So
very exciting. Very exciting stuff.
But this was one of the earliest examples of a slasher movie because you had a lot of those early tropes where you have this at first seemingly random, but then you find out that this collection of people who are being targeted are, related. They are connected because they used to be sorority sisters, and they are targeted by this woman named Ursula who was forced to leave that school. Keep in mind the time period. This came out in 1932. This woman was mixed race, and she was essentially forced to leave. So she goes after the women that made her leave. She manipulates them into either committing murder, into getting murdered, killing themselves, all sorts of horrible things, until she eventually goes after one of those women's kids, is thwarted by police, and then decides to yeet herself off of a train instead of getting caught.
I hate to say this, but I support her wrongs. You'll learn as we go through this podcast today that I'm a big supporter of all women's wrongs, and they could do no wrong because I support those wrongs. So what's really interesting about that is some people would even argue that we had the Gaio films. I don't know how many of you know a lot about Gaio films, but it's very interesting because there were two very specific ones that really brought on the tropes.
Yeah, but before we fully dig into Gaio films, I just want to introduce that concept a little bit. One of the most well-known ones is Suspiria. So that old Italian horror with the very you kind of have those bright colors, kind of shocking, very, I don't know. You know a little more about
exactly.
Yeah.
So
I can't say it.
It's okay.
I'm Italian and I can't say it.
Hey, it's okay. So a big one for that, actually, talking on what you said, was The Bird in the Crystal Plumage. So that came out in 1970. And how that basically worked was it really developed the big elaborate murder scenes that we see in slasher films. They took the aesthetic, they cranked it up to 100, made them colorful, exciting, engaging, and really built what we see as the slasher aesthetic today, whether you're watching something as early as a Halloween to as late as a Maxine. So I would say that's one of our most influential Gaio films, especially as we move into the beginning of the slasher genre, which I would say kind of really started around the 70s. Would you agree, Scarlet?
Definitely the 1970s is where you really saw the slasher genre begin and take off. And one of the movies that I feel gets left out in slasher conversations, especially in early slasher conversations, is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Because a lot of people point to, first slasher, Halloween.
Fair.
And I'm like, no, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That came out 4 years earlier in 1974. Yes? Oh, and now we have feedback. Wait.
Hey, live show, folks. That's what happens here live. Am I right? But okay.
Feedback.
So
It's
tell
okay.
me about Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
All right, so Texas Chainsaw Massacre came out in 1974. What I found really interesting while watching this movie and looking into it. Well, one, it's a slow burn, which I was not originally expecting from a movie called Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I'm
Fair.
like, all right, where's the blood and guts? Let's go. And
You're
then I was
expecting
like,
the chainsaw right away.
yeah, and then it wasn't there. But I also made the mistake of watching the 2003 one and then the Netflix one first.
Yeah.
They were both bad.
Ooh, I see the audience.
Don't
They
do
understand. They've got it. Hey, as we said, live show. Who knows? Maybe there's a ghost trying to hang out here with us today.
The ghost is mad at me.
We love a good spiritual ghost. They're very spooky, but hey, that's okay. We're talking about slashers, we're talking about horror, and talking into that more ghostly slasher. Let's talk a little bit about Halloween, because there's a lot of debate on what exactly Michael Myers is, right? We've got, is he a demon? Is he a human? Is he really a person? So let's go into why Halloween was so influential for the slasher genre. And I think it starts with the direction.
Yeah, well, what's also really interesting is John Carpenter, the director, was originally a musical composer.
Yes, I did.
That's why the score is as just amazing and as, it really just, it's suspenseful. It's iconic. It just really, it gets that,
It
that
gets
mood
your
going,
your heart pumping.
Exactly.
And I would say it also created that aesthetic of being able to show so little but tell so much. Because you've got a killer like Michael Myers, and part of the reason he became so infamous in horror is that he can shy away, do it all in the quiet, do it all in the shadows, and leave so much carnage behind him.
Yeah. No, that was what was really fun about watching those two. Just because I did go on a deep dive on those, and I was just I kind of checked out in the middle of the fourth one.
Fair. I mean, we all have our preferred, especially as we move into franchises here. We do all have our preferred areas in the franchises. That's very normal.
Well, what else is really fun about Halloween specifically is 2 years later, in 1980, a little movie called Friday the 13th came out. And the director, Sean S. Cunningham himself, has said, yeah, we were trying to rip off Halloween.
I mean, come on.
Who wouldn't?
It's basically untitled Halloween reboot.
Yeah.
Fan film. I love that.
But the twist, though.
The twist is so great in Friday the 13th, and that kind of plays into these early tropes of the 70s slasher genres.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about conventions of masked killers, suspense. We're talking about the phallic symbolism of the 70s slasher horrors. So tell us a little bit about this twist.
Stabby.
Exactly, stabby. So tell us a little bit about this twist, Scarlett, and why you think it was so influential for these 70s slasher genre films.
Are we specifically the Pamela Voorhees being the killer? So what was really interesting with that is because they did set up Jason as this killer throughout the whole movie, and then it's plot twist, here's this little old lady going around axe murdering people. And it's interesting because that also ties into one of the other main tropes, which is the whole, don't have sex or you'll die in a horror movie.
Yes.
That was such a big one. They even parodied it in Scream.
Oh, exactly.
I can talk.
I was going to say, obviously, with your Scream mask, you would know, obviously, your first victim had to die because she didn't know it was Mrs. Voorhees. She thought it was Jason.
Yeah.
And we do eventually get Jason in the later films, but it really speaks to how the genre kind of played into these conventions and these ideas of teen sex, big no-no. Never go out alone. And we see the deadly consequences of these pieces. And as this started getting popularized, we started to need to make rewrites and reinvigorate the genre in some way. And I think Wes Craven was a huge reason we were able to reinvigorate the genre.
Yeah. I mean, Wes Craven was so iconic with his slasher creations. He made 3 really big ones. We had Nightmare on Elm Street with Freddy Krueger, obviously.
Freddy's a rock star, what can we say?
Robert Englund himself said it, Freddy is a rock star.
And he's finally getting a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. So there's that too.
I did not know that. I love
Right on
that plan.
time.
Also, we have the Scream movies, which is very much a commentary on these movies, on the slasher genre, but we will be getting into that a little later.
Absolutely.
And also, in the late 90s, we had Wishmaster, which it kind of gets lumped into that slasher genre. He kind of counts.
You see, I actually have never seen Wishmaster.
Oh.
I never have.
Oh, I'm
just
showing
thinking
you those
Freddy.
later.
So tell us a little bit about Wishmaster
So
and why it
that's-
connects to Freddy.
Way later, late 90s. Again, you have that, like, here's a killer just coming out, you know, here to, you know.
Coming in your dreams.
No, not coming in your dreams.
No,
he's here.
interesting.
He's here to grant wishes and then take your soul and kill you.
So an evil genie.
Exactly, evil genie. Robert Englund's also in the movie, just for fun.
Even better.
You know, he's not the bad guy. He's just there for fun. But you do have, again, like a lot of the tropes that I feel like we should definitely dive into.
Absolutely, especially
have-
those supernatural elements.
Yeah, the supernatural elements, but also certain character tropes. Like you have your masked killer.
Okay, yeah.
You have your final girl.
Got it.
Scream Queen in the same vein as the final girl.
Yeah. Laurie Strode. Love her.
Yep. Let's see. There's also the revenge killer. I
Yes.
feel like it's such a big one that we see with, you know, as the slasher villain's motivations.
Absolutely. And I think that's why people relate so much to the slasher genre is I feel like in a small way, an audience who can tell me if it's true or not, we all kind of relate to the revenge slasher killer in a few ways. Whether we like to admit it or not, we've all had a really bad day at work. We've all had a really bad day in traffic. We all know what it feels like to be like, you know what? I need to get home and watch Scream today to be able to get through my life.
I mean, I think Patrick Bateman over here would scare me the most if they had a bad day at work.
That is true. Unfortunately, as we all know, I love Patrick Bateman. We've heard it on the podcast before. He was my, like, when I was going through a very toxic job, was like, let me just sit here thinking about Patrick Bateman and just feel better. Like, if we're any fans of Ice Nine Kills, I listen to the Hip to Be Scared every single day just to get me through. And that's the interesting thing about slashers. I feel like they've been doing this since their very early influences. We're talking about Psycho. People really loved that film. It really created a whole new wave of fan that didn't really exist just quite yet. And then it came down through the rest of the generations.
Which,
so,
speaking of Psycho, did you know that Psycho has like 4 sequels?
yes, I did know that actually.
Yeah, I have a box set. I haven't touched it.
I love this.
I haven't touched it because I'm scared.
Honestly,
I'm scared that it's going to be
Fair.
bad.
no, I would say if you're
Also, I
gonna
don't have a
watch-
DVD player.
Fair, but if you're gonna watch like a bad version of Psycho, please take the time to watch Vince Vaughn in Psycho remake. Take your time, go watch it. Just let that live in your brain for you.
Okay.
It's very, very fun. But talking about that, we're moving into the 80s. So as we move on into the 80s, there's a really big evolution of trope. And I know that you are an expert at this, Scarlett. So can you tell me a little bit about how these tropes evolved?
Oh, expert's a strong word, but I love that you're granting me that
I have
title.
this kind of confidence in you. You've got this.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, as we go on into the 80s, what do we get? Franchises.
Yay!
We get franchises. Everyone needs a sequel. I appreciate you for clapping,
Thank you
my
for
friend.
clapping. We all love a franchise.
But yeah, I mean, Jason, I think, over the years ended up accumulating like 13 movies.
That would actually be really funny if there were 13 movies and it's Friday the 13th. It is 13? Okay, that is even better. So it's exactly 13 and it's
Yeah.
Friday the 13th. He's really
Yeah, he has 13.
banging on that number.
No, and
13
then,
is his number.
Oh my God, I have to
Yes,
think. I think
love it.
Freddy
Love
is
it.
at, I'm trying to think, is that 13 including the remake? Okay.
Oh, perfect.
And then Freddy he had 6, Wes Craven's New Nightmare. So like, if we're including Freddy versus Jason, then he's got like 9, I think, including New Nightmare and the remake. So we got. Oh no, I'm talking Freddy. Freddy.
Oh,
I'm
he's
switching
next.
over.
Yeah, Freddy.
Freddy's got like 9 movies, I think, altogether. Halloween, I lost count. I'm not going to attempt to count that
so
one because we
many.
have like 6 different timelines. There's like 4 different Halloween timelines.
Yeah.
Our friend over there is doing the math. I love you.
I'm telling you, Season of the Witch.
Bad.
Awesome. If you haven't seen it, I think it's really fun.
Oh,
for
Season of the
Halloween.
Witch?
Yeah.
No.
I love it.
11 Halloween movies.
You're the best audience member ever. It's like, make sure this is all fact checked. But yes, what's really interesting about that franchising, right, is we became so familiarized with the characters and we learned so much about them. But in that vein,
they also work to give these characters more of a backstory. Like
exactly.
Freddy, especially, we pick up more of his backstory in 3, 4, even 5, like 3, 4, 5, and 6. That's when they give us his backstory, and they just build more and more on it, and they make it weirder. Alice Cooper's his dad or his adopted dad. No, Alice Cooper's his adopted dad. And Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare. But that's in the 90s. That's in the early 90s, I think.
Yeah, that one's going into the early 90s. That was a weird one.
That movie was weird.
So since we're talking about,
but we had the franchises, and this is kind of the point where it became less about watching these movies to see how our survivors can overcome this bad guy.
Okay.
And it became more about, hey, how can we watch people die in fun and gory ways? And I feel like this is where you get that shift in, let's root for the villain. Let's root for the slasher.
Okay, I can see it.
Tell me, all right, who here was going into the Friday the 13th sequels, after the fourth one, like, hey, I really hope we see Tommy Jarvis again. He was great.
Not me. I personally was like, okay, so how is Jason going to kill this person next? Because we've basically seen absolutely everything.
Exactly. And then in Nightmare, they literally just, anyone who survived the movie before got it. Pretty much bit it in the next one.
Yeah, they were done.
They didn't even call back Patricia Arquette from Dream Warriors. They just had some other chick take over, and then she bit it in the first 5 minutes. And I was like, hey, girl, you got to take over now. And this girl's like, wait, what? Wait, why?
But what's interesting about that
Tell me I'm wrong.
I want to know, especially Scarlett, because you love the slasher genre as much as you do. Where would you say kind of where that takes a downturn? Do we think the franchising enhanced the slasher genre, or do we think maybe it started to build some pitfalls?
I mean, at that point, they were really just making movies to make movies. Okay. They were trying to keep a hold of the property. Budgets were going down.
Yeah.
Because the other thing is they lost a lot of the original creators.
That's fair.
Wes Craven wasn't really attached to the Nightmare movies after a certain point.
Interesting. Okay.
There's been so many rights issues over the years with the character of Jason Voorhees in Friday the 13th.
Yeah.
So there's, even Halloween, I think at some point John Carpenter stopped being attached to it.
Interesting.
So
okay.
It just shifted so much from what the original vision was. Which I think is interesting how I think one of the few franchises that really did stick to the original creator's vision up to a certain point was Scream.
Interesting.
But I mean, Scream up until the most recent two, but that's because Wes Craven unfortunately was no longer with us at that point. But that's, again, jumping ahead of ourselves a little here.
So there's more than just franchising, though, as we head towards the 80s and the 90s. I would say the big next thing in slasher was the remake.
Yeah, I mean, we did get some remakes in the 90s, but we weren't, I feel like the early 2000s is really the big...
Where it started to boom.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like there were some, 90s remakes. They have just decided to leave my brain at the moment.
That's
because
okay.
Of course they do. That was 2010, my love.
But speaking on that remake kind of era, there are definitely films that I feel got better as they made more of them. And I think Sleepaway Camp is a really good example of that.
Yes. So where we had our franchises, we also had our one-off movies, our let's have 2 or 3 of these before they cut the cord on us. So Sleepaway Camp was an interesting one where I personally feel like the sequels are done better than the original. But that's just because the original I feel like was it was done well. It was definitely more of that traditional slasher. We're gonna put you in the eyes of the killer.
Gotcha.
It's also a murder mystery because you're trying to figure out who is the killer, and then at the end you get that very shocking reveal of it's Angela the whole time. Plot twist: Angela is a dude. But the sequels, they're how do we build on this?
Fair.
Because it just ends with
It
ends, and it's such a strange ending because there's what looks to be like a 14-year-old girl's head on the body of a 40-year-old man.
Yeah, that one's
and she's like,
what?
Like it looks like she would be screaming, but she's making like a hissing noise. It's just, and then it ends. It just ends.
So it needed a sequel. It was screaming for a sequel.
Hissing for one for sure.
Hissing for a sequel, absolutely. So
what's interesting in the sequels, and also keep in mind, this is the mid-'80s at this point.
Yeah.
Because the original Sleepaway Camp was 1983.
Okay.
The sequels came out in, I don't have the years written down off the top of my head. I should have done that earlier, but the sequels.
Time is a concept.
Yeah. Sequels were mid-'80s. So what's really, so they also brought in a different actress to play Angela Baker.
Okay.
So, because it's supposed to take place like many years later.
All right.
Same camp, different name. Because you can't call it Camp Arawak when everyone knows that everyone got murdered there by some crazy kid.
They were going through some intense rebranding.
Yeah.
Yeah. As a marketer, I would know.
Yeah, they had to do that a lot in the past couple of years. But what's really interesting is, Angela Baker comes back. She keeps her name as Angela, just changes her last name. It's like, oh yeah, there was this killer Angela that was like running around and like killing people. Hey Angela, did you see where Pam went? Deadass. That's
Wild.
The second movie.
Wild.
Hey Angela, why are people going missing?
I have no idea, Angela. Can you tell me?
You see, these here's the thing though, like the second and third movies, they are like the thing is like they understand the assignment in the sense that like they know that they are here to be that like really fun, almost like that spectacle, which is something I wanted to get into with 80s slasher, where it really became more about the spectacle, the creative kills, but also the fact that we have a slasher villain, that we have a person get gender affirming care, and she's like, guess what? I'm a woman. They gave me surgery and stuff.
That's awesome. Like,
yeah, she actually so part of the lore of the character is, after, she was found, having killed people, they took her she was brought into a mental health facility.
Okay.
And they evaluated her. They were like, well, you were raised as a girl. Is that, how is that, does that work for you? And she was like, yeah, I'm a girl. And they were like, okay, cool, you're a girl. We're gonna roll with it. So she actually got the 80s version of gender affirming care, which is such an interesting concept. But I feel like that's also kind of speaks to another, that could be a whole other topic also, just
absolutely,
queers in horror, which we did a podcast episode on back in June.
Podcast episode on that in June for Pride Month. Yes, but that's incredible for the 80s, and I think it says a lot for why the slasher genre really appeals to so many groups of people.
Yeah, but kind of circling back to what I said before about the 80s being a spectacle, especially in Sleepaway Camp 3, which literally opens up with Angela running over someone in fake New York with an 18-wheeler in order to steal their identity.
Love this for her. I support her wrongs. All about it.
If you think I'm fucking with you, look it up. I swear.
I love this. I love this for her. Incredible.
It's on
Tubi.
Tubi.
It's a sleigh.
It's on Tubi. I'm making you watch it
and
later.
will be on Tubi tonight. But as you were saying.
No, but it really just, I feel like in the 80s, these movies also became about again, how can we watch these killers kill people in unique and interesting ways? And again, it kind of ties into rooting for the killer.
Yeah.
But because here's the thing. If you ask me about Nightmare on Elm Street 5.
Okay.
I don't remember most of it. But I'll tell you, I remember Freddy Krueger turning this one chick into a cockroach and crushing her in a tube to kill her.
What a way to go.
Yeah,
I want that on my tombstone.
Working out too.
Wonderful. I want that on my tombstone. So, when I finally bite the dust, Scarlet, you need to make sure there's a little cockroach on it in a little glass that just has a little animatronic that goes like this and slowly crushes it. Please.
But can it be like a cat?
Fine. It can be a cat.
Like one of those lucky cats.
Yes, I agree. It can be a lucky cat. But no, I think you're completely right in the fact that we remember these kills. We remember these sensationalized, fantastical kills.
Yeah.
And that's what made the slasher genre really begin to stand out, and I think gave them the opportunity to use the fact that they were kind of falling out of vogue because of the excessive violence to really tell more subversive stories.
Mm-hmm. And again, like that kind of leads us into the 90s.
Okay.
It leads us, again, like kind of like, and that's also where slashers kind of got weird.
All right.
We had, like, again, we had Nightmare on Elm Street 6, which I said before was weird movie. Very weird movie. I keep going in and out of the mic. I'm so sorry, guys.
Girl, you're good. Scarlett, you good, girl. Don't worry. This is a live show. There's always going to be stuff going on. As I said, I think there's probably a ghost hanging out here. It wouldn't be a horror con if there wasn't a ghost. Don't worry about it. Tell me some more about as we led into the 90s.
Yeah. So leading into the 90s, Nightmare on Elm Street 6 was, I'm trying to think, because New Nightmare was 94. So somewhere between, like, so somewhere before that was definitely Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare, which was directed by Rachel Talalay, who would do the Tank Girl movie. So just so you understand what we are working with in terms of a movie here, that's what we're working with.
Okay.
It was weird. It was not the most coherent, but you had interesting stuff, like Freddy Krueger playing a guy like a video game in order to kill him, and saying things like, "Now I'm playing with power." 91. Thank you. 91.
Thank you. They're the best. I think like
we love when the audience
official
participates.
new member of the Nest. I think that's an automatic given.
Thank you, friend. But yes. So yeah, 91. That was Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare. Freddy has a daughter, just kind of floating around.
I've seen the first one, and as I told you, like, because that's why I think it's so interesting about these franchises, because I know you've seen a lot of the other sequels. Meanwhile, I'm kind of like so dead set on, I love the first one. I'm too worried to watch the rest.
Yeah. But speaking of franchises and, like that's the other fun thing, a lot of these franchises, they kind of got so far out of control because they left the hands of their original creators.
Okay.
Wes Craven's New Nightmare came out in 1994.
Okay.
That was Wes Craven kind of reclaiming Freddy. In a way, it was like a Freddy redemption, because even Robert Englund himself has said that after a certain point, Freddy Krueger became a rock star more than like a scary villain.
Yeah.
And also, like, for context, the original Freddy makeup was modeled off of a weird-looking pizza that the artists and directors saw. Like, they were at a diner trying to figure out what they were doing, and they're like, all right, we got pizza, let's kind of poke around it. Boom, that's Freddy Krueger.
I love that everything goes back to pizza.
I know.
I feel like so many things go back to pizza on this podcast. But awesome. Okay, so when he reclaimed Freddy.
So, and what's really interesting about Wes Craven's New Nightmare is everyone talks about Scream as that being like the meta commentary on horror, which is true.
Yeah, it is true.
I love it. But New Nightmare was very much like Wes Craven's first foray into that.
Okay.
Before he made Scream, and Scream boomed into the franchise that it is. But Scream had to be a franchise for it to be
exactly
keep going with the commentary that it makes. So,
what commentary would you say, like, because I haven't seen New Nightmare, and I'm sure most of our audience would like to hear a little bit more about this. Where do you think that started with New Nightmare to lead into Wes Craven making Scream?
So what was interesting about New Nightmare is how it basically takes place in a mock version of the real world. So Heather Langenkamp is a character.
Okay.
She has a family, like she's married, she has a kid. Wes Craven exists as a character.
That's great.
John Saxon, I believe, was the actor's name. Yes, thank you. You would know, babe.
We're among the people.
Yes, John Saxon and Robert Englund were also they were playing themselves.
Okay.
And in this story, Freddy Krueger was just a name given to this ancient evil that essentially needed to be like written in stories in order to be contained.
Okay, that's kind of cool. I like that, actually.
And so this was for an anniversary of, it would have been like the 10-year anniversary of the original Nightmare on Elm Street.
Oh, that's cool. Okay.
And after those 10 years, for that ancient evil, which had now taken the form of Freddy Krueger, was coming to, menace the people that were in the movie.
Wow,
so,
okay.
And, some people were like getting brutally murdered. Other people were just straight up disappearing, presumably brutally murdered. And it's really interesting because the Freddy makeup is much, scarier. It's more like wound looking than like crispy pizza looking.
Got it.
He gets a spooky trench coat.
Love a spooky trench coat.
His glove is more, it's like bone and like sinewy looking.
Okay.
So he's a much more sinister and like menacing looking Freddy Krueger.
It brings the horror back to Freddy.
Exactly. Oh yeah, and did I say he gets a cool trench coat? I probably said that already.
You did, but I love a good cool trench coat.
Yeah.
So would you say this was kind of the beginning for Wes Craven to come and bring us a franchise like Scream that really re-envisioned and brought back the slasher genre?
Oh, for sure. It's like, again, this was 2 years before Scream.
Okay.
And, again, Scream also would not be what it is without the writer Kevin Williamson.
That's true.
Which I just wanted to give a man his flowers where it's deserved. But Wes Craven was the director for the first 4.
Gotcha. Okay.
And, again, he did, especially with the limitations he had on 3 and 4, which we'll dive into a little bit.
Absolutely.
He did a really good job.
Okay.
Now, 2 and 3 may not be my favorites, but I respect them for what they are and what they did.
So I've only seen the first Scream movie, and I highly enjoy how the first Scream movie really went in deep with Randy's rule of horror movies.
We love Randy.
We love him. He's a great, great human being. And for me, I love Stu and I love Billy, which is why it was really hard for me to let go and watch Scream 2. And I loved how well they played into these tropes. So Can you tell me a little bit about, because you've seen the rest of the franchise.
I've seen all of them.
Can you tell us a little
Except
bit about...
Except the TV show, that doesn't exist.
That's fair. I think most people don't even realize the TV show exists. But
because
it is there.
It exists, but we don't acknowledge it.
Exactly. It's kind of like the live-action Avatar movie. We just don't acknowledge it.
What live-action Avatar movie?
Exactly.
It's like what Crow remake movie?
Exactly. Too soon. But can you tell us a little... What's that? I've never heard of Friday the 13th, a series.
It's like, what's Pet Sematary Bloodlines?
Where did it come from? So how did it come from Scream 1? And we know kind of the basics of Scream 1. How did they evolve that throughout the franchise, do you think?
Well, again, the original Scream was a big one when it comes to the meta commentary.
Okay.
Because it really just dived into all the tropes. It also directly references a lot of of those movies. Like, they talk about prom night. They're watching Halloween.
That is such a great scene.
They mention Leatherface because he refers to Billy as Leatherface as a joke in the movie. I believe it's in the...
When they're in the video store.
In the video store scene, yeah. Like, Randy literally just, I think, gets off on referencing horror movies. Which,
he does.
Same.
I mean, good for you, Randy. Randy really always deserves his flowers. He's all of us secretly, like, in our basements watching the same, like, horror movie over and over and over and over again.
Let's see. I mean, me watching the 2003 Texas Chainsaw Massacre, literally, I think I was just fully turned into Randy at that point, yelling at my TV screen.
You're not following the rules.
Oh my God, I was so mad watching that one. But again, jumping ahead a little too much there. So again, we keep talking about Randy. Randy's rules of horror. You don't drink, no drugs. It's the sin factor. Don't do it. You got to stay pure. That's how you survive. That's how you become a final girl.
Exactly.
Or a final boy, but final boys,
or final person.
Well, the tropes are final girl and final boy, but really final girl is the more well-known of the two.
Yes, that's true.
Final boy just happens. And what's actually interesting is final girl, that you don't actually have to be the like pure virgin doesn't do anything to fit that trope. All you have to do is be the last girl alive.
That's true.
It just so happens that a lot of final girls fit certain tropes, and that's why those tropes exist in the way that they do. That's why we associate them as we do.
Exactly. Especially with the slasher really using the knife as a phallic symbol, right? So I know we were talking about this a little earlier as we were sitting, we're thinking about, how do we make this really interesting? The phallic symbol, when we think about it, yes, it's used by Michael Myers for aggression, sexual aggression, and this bigger fear of being contained and sexually contained. So what I think is really interesting is when you think about Scream and we think about Billy being our killer, spoiler alert, if you still haven't seen Scream, if you haven't, please do, is all because Sid doesn't want to put it out.
We're also skipping ahead to rule 3.
Yeah.
There's rule 2. Never say I'll be right back.
Yeah, that's a bad one.
You won't be back.
Nope, never.
And then, we have our buddy Stu. I'll be right back.
We love Stu screaming, I'll be right back.
Yep. And then rule 3 is don't have sex. gotta stay a virgin, gotta stay pure. Again, sin factor. But yeah, so back to you because you were about to go off.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have the phallic symbol, and a lot of that goes into how we're speaking about Billy. And when we think about it, not only is Billy doing this because Sid's
Mommy issues.
Such
a big trope, too.
Caused his parents' marriage to collapse. So he's viewing this sexual deviance as something that he needs to fight against and take revenge for. So that's the really kind of key piece here, as well as Sid wouldn't put out until the very end of the movie. So we've got him constantly killing, and now he can finally kill who he wants to kill, Sid and her father, so that they can frame it all on him, make it look like a murder-suicide, and move on, perfectly planned, as Stu would say.
Yep.
So I think that was a huge piece of what they built in. So moving forward there, that's just Scream 1, and that's just touching the basics for everybody. So what about Scream 2? Because you've told me a lot of things about Scream 2. I haven't seen Scream 2. As I said, I'm very protective of my OG characters, but I'm willing to give it a chance because you gave me some really interesting insight on it today.
So yes, Scream 2. It is not my favorite, again.
Okay.
But it is pretty good. It kind of plays on the school, like college setting trope.
Okay.
Because it takes place a little while after Sid and Randy are in college.
Okay.
Dewey has to show up as soon as he hears some shit is afoot because,
Of course.
He's protective older brother vibe.
I do love Dewey. He's the best. We all love Dewey.
Gail Weathers is the worst.
Oh, Gail Weathers is the worst. I could just watch compilations of Gail Weathers getting punched in the face by Sid.
Right? A little bit.
She does. She does get better a little later in the
little bit,
franchise,
but,
as I've heard.
My favorite part of every movie is watching her get punched.
That's right. Women's wrongs. But here's the thing, though. She was, like, jumping down another woman to get her wrongs. So I was a little like, I was like, okay, Gail, you were an example of your wrongs. Cool. I support you for being there in the end.
Yeah.
However, you're not my favorite. And we can move on and let Sid just punch you. Because that is also a woman's wrong. Right?
I mean,
think
speaking
so.
of women's wrongs in Scream 2, one of the killers is Billy's mom. She has a name. Do I remember her name? No, Mrs. I don't even know if she's given a name outside of Mrs. Loomis, or Debbie Salt, I believe, is the character that she plays as.
Interesting.
She
Okay.
pretends to be a reporter called, like, Debbie Salt.
Okay.
Salty bitch. It's really funny, actually.
That is really funny. I like that. Salty
And then-
bitch. Okay.
Yeah, so Mrs. Loomis.
You know what? That's woman's wrongs I can support.
Yeah,
Let's
so
go.
she goes after Sydney because she killed her baby boy, which is really funny because, girl, you were not in his life.
Yeah,
she
wasn't there. That was the whole reason why I went on a killing spree in the first place.
Like, girl, you were gone.
Girl, you gone.
Yeah, it is just
We
Mrs.
knew
Loomis.
it.
Yeah, I knew it.
No first name.
Which, again, Mrs. Loomis, like, girl, where were you? Where were
When
you
he
with Mr.
needed
Loomis?
you.
Yeah, so Mrs. Loomis, and she enlists the help of Mickey Altieri.
Okay.
Hopefully I'm saying his last name right.
That's okay.
For someone who's Italian, I
Mick.
should be pronouncing Italian last names right. But
That's okay. You got that splash of soy sauce, as you like
what's
to say.
interesting with him is he's already a serial killer. He just wants to be a famous serial killer.
Okay.
So he decides to join up with her, don the ghost face mask, and commit more murder.
Interesting.
But it's interesting because, again, this plays into the revenge killer trope. You get also a play on Jason's mom being the killer. Because you get a play on Jason's mom being the killer
They just
after the
swapped
death of her
it.
son.
That's really cool. I like that.
Yeah, and it's interesting actually because they look kind of similar. If you like squint, tilt your head to the side a little bit, you got the short hair, a little old lady, not suspecting. They front like they want to help out, and then actually, no, fuck you, we're gonna kill you.
Interesting. So there was also something else you were telling me about the Scream sequels that I think folks would like to hear about as we're moving forward within the genre. And that was the idea of the Scream universe having their own movie.
Yes,
The Stab
That is
movie.
the other thing. Scream 2 introduces Stab, which is the in-universe version of Scream.
Okay.
So basically, they were like, they even like made jokes about this in the first movie. where Sid was like, "Hey, if they made a movie about this, who do you think would play us?"
I remember that. Okay.
Yeah. And she's like, "Oh, I think that they probably like cast me as Tori Spelling, or no, I think it was Dewey who said like I see you as a young Tori Spelling myself."
Oh,
something like that.
90210.
Someone made a Tori Spelling joke. That's who they have play Sid in the movie.
Wonderful. Okay.
Yeah. So they did that. It was also really funny because, as you watch Stab, like, because you do see the opening of Stab, how it's supposed to recreate the opening of the first Scream.
Okay.
And again, this also plays into some of the sex appeal of the slasher genre.
Interesting. Okay.
Because, she's there, she's like about, Drew Barrymore's character, who's not Drew Barrymore. She's about to get in the shower. She's like, taking her clothes off.
So she's not making popcorn.
No.
She's not getting ready to watch a movie.
She picks up the phone. She's like starting to flirt. And it's like,
Drew Barrymore didn't die for this.
Drew Barrymore did not die for this. Drew Barrymore did not say, "Hey, can I be barefoot this entire scene because I hate wearing shoes for this."
Just for this.
Fun fact, that is why she's barefoot in that scene. She just hates wearing shoes.
I love this for her. I totally get it.
I just know too many useless facts about movies.
That's what's so fun about slashers, though. So, especially speaking there, when you talk about that sexualization that they do of Drew Barrymore's character in Stab, what other tropes do you think they really bring to light with Stab?
So with Stab, especially as they go on, because Stab, for a couple of movies, they do follow Sydney's story.
Okay.
And then in Scream 4, so I'm jumping ahead a little bit. We're gonna
all right, that's okay.
We're
back to on 3. This ride with you.
But they do because they have to kind of like jump because Stab 2 is supposed to follow the events of Scream 2.
Okay,
but you don't really see any of that on screen. Scream 3 is the making of Stab 3. That takes place. So Scream 3, which came out in 2000, that's bringing us into the new millennium. We're making fun of trilogies now, guys.
We love making fun of a good trilogy. Unless you're Lord of the Rings, you can step right back.
There's only one good trilogy, and it is Lord of the Rings.
Correct. That's true. Back to the Future also still fits there. Evil Dead.
Well, they're not a... Well, yeah, you know what?
That's
they're a trilogy. They are a trilogy. I was not a trilogy anymore, but no, they are.
We'll accept when we're beat. We've got to agree with you guys.
I love Evil Dead.
But with the creating of this joke on the trilogy...
Yes.
What were the big kind of calling cards? And Wes Craven was still working on Scream 3 at this point, right?
Yes, he was. Okay. Now, what's interesting to note about Scream 3, which again, this one's actually one of my least favorites of the franchise. Okay. But when I read more about it, I'm like, oh, this makes sense. They had to go through a lot of rewrites. They had to go through a lot of rewrites because stuff was like the whole script got leaked. Which apparently was a thing back in the 90s. I didn't realize that the internet was that strong back then.
Interesting. Okay, I didn't know that either.
Yeah,
all right.
They were dealing with stuff getting leaked. They also had to. Keep in mind this was also post Columbine.
Okay.
They had to cut back a lot on the gore.
Okay, that makes sense.
There was a lot of public scrutiny because they actually do touch on a little bit in Scream 2 how there was a lot of moral panic, how violent movies cause violent behavior.
Yeah, okay, so like the Satanic Panic.
Yeah, you got
yes and no, or a more evolved version of
It's a more evolved version of that. It's the same thing that people have been saying forever. Metal causes violent behavior. Horror movies cause violent behavior. Even though Billy literally says movies don't make psychos, they just make psychos more creative.
Exactly.
But... what do we know?
No, exactly. What do we know? We're just two horror lovers ourselves.
Yes.
And we haven't killed anybody that you know of. Yeah. But speaking
I just kill people's dreams.
That is very interesting. So as we move through the Scream filmography, what would you say, the turning point? Well,
keep in mind, with Scream 3, I just wanted to point out a couple of things, like a couple of fun tropes.
Absolutely.
Because... what I thought was really funny, we were talking about Randy's rules earlier, because Randy dies in Scream 2.
Yeah.
R.I.P. to a good one. But he does make a little cameo in 3, where he brings up the rules of trilogies, which, again, this is why this one's not my favorite, because it makes fun of how trilogies happen to throw in some dumb shit lore, that change. It's like, oh, this changes everything. You're gonna get some long lost relative.
No.
You know, like all of a sudden, the killer in 3, Roman, is Sydney's long lost brother.
Oh, fun.
Which is fun because it's, again, kind of a callback to Michael Myers being Laurie's brother. That was not always the plan.
It wasn't. And what was fun about that, just to jump a little ahead, is when we got Halloween 2018 and we got our Legacy sequel, they actually pointed out, they were like, oh, that was just some crazy rumor. I was never related to Michael Myers. So that's really fun that's something that they started pointing out in something as early, when you're talking about 90s or 2018, as the Scream franchise.
Yeah. Oh, and also, guys, Randy did not die a virgin.
No, Randy did not deserve to die a virgin, and he didn't.
That's why he died.
Good. You know what? If he's going to die one way, I'm happy that Randy went out in blazes of glory.
Yeah. He's like, if you're seeing this video, that means I'm dead, and that's because I had sex. And it's like,
him.
Good job, Randy.
So proud. So proud.
But yeah, so that's bringing us to the new millennium, which brought us some fun stuff. I like to call it the era of remakes because, dear God, there were so many.
There were so many remakes in the 2000s.
I mean, I think all of the big ones had their remakes.
Yeah.
So we had Texas Chainsaw Massacre in 2003.
Quite a few.
We had Rob Zombie's Halloween in 2007.
Yep.
My Bloody Valentine in 2009.
I liked the My Bloody Valentine remake.
You see, I saw it. I wish
enjoyed
I remembered
it.
more. I remembered enjoying it, but I just like don't remember much of it right now because there's so many other movies I've seen that are better.
That's fair. It might have been Jensen Ackles for me. I think that might have been.
I think it was Jensen Ackles for a lot of people, but that's actually something I noticed in a lot of these movies. But I'm going to go back to that because like I was saying, we have My Bloody Valentine in 2009, and then also in 2009 we had Friday the 13th. In 2010, we had Nightmare on Elm Street, and I am jumping ahead a little bit because I totally forgot about Prom Night in 2008.
Oh, that's right.
So we just had
Prom Night.
Remakes after remakes.
I think it has like a total score of 6% on Rotten Tomatoes. That's true.
The Fright Night remake was actually good.
We love the Fright Night remake. We will say this. We really enjoy it, and we love Anton Yelchin.
Yeah. No.
So I love that exists for him.
Yeah, also, like, David Tennant was pretty funny as Peter Vincent in that one.
Yeah, he was pretty funny. I will give him that. And, I mean, makes sense because we're here with our Fright Night folks here at Hudson Valley Horror Fest. So that's always very exciting.
And I met Chris Sarandon once.
He's great. I love Chris Sarandon. And with these remakes, obviously, there's good ones, there are bad ones. But what do you think the real question when people were seeing these?
I think the real question was, who was this made for? Because they weren't very well, overall, they were not very well received.
They were not made for the fans.
Yeah, because there was a lot of deviations from the source material that just did not go over well.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because in some movies, you had ways that attempted to pay homage to the original. Like in the Friday the 13th remake, you had the opening kind of be a brief retelling of the ending of the first movie, where you see Mrs. Voorhees get her head chopped off, and you see some blonde chick, presumably Alice, who is the final girl in the first movie, kind of fuck off across the river or across the lake. It's Camp Crystal Lake.
I would have gone across that lake so fast.
We all tried to in the Friday the 13th game.
Rest in peace. We miss it.
That game was fun.
The thing there too is very interesting.
Who was it made for? The other thing is a lot of these movies were just very edgy.
Yeah, they had that edgelord vibe.
Yeah, I mean, like it was very edgy. There was, especially in Rob Zombie's Halloween, which shout out to my dad who thought it was a good idea to show me that when I was like 12 years old.
Love that for you.
I don't think he realized what was in that.
No, I think he just saw Rob Zombie and went with it.
No, he saw Halloween and went with it.
Oh.
My dad didn't know who Rob Zombie was at that point.
Okay, fair.
Yeah.
I will say, for Rob Zombie, I enjoy a lot of his...
I love his music.
Original films. I like his music and his original films.
I like his original films, but
Halloween, not so much.
I couldn't get through that because I was 12. And I was like 11 or 12. And my dad had to be like, I can't watch this with you. And I'm like, I can't watch this, Dad, either. And he's like, okay, we're going to stop now.
Thank you for being self-aware enough to know that is not made for me.
This is where the line is drawn.
But I think that's where we come from.
But
Who was it made for?
Well, again, there was also just like a lot of sex appeal thrown into these movies.
Yeah.
And again, like even with like Rob Zombie's Halloween, there was a lot of deviations from the source material, not always done in a respectful way. I know in the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, there were certain choices made with Freddy Krueger's character. Oh, yeah.
See, it's better I didn't see it then.
No, but Judith Hoag shows up for like 0.2 seconds.
I do love Judith Hoag.
So yeah,
we love Judith Hoag.
She's never
on
seen
this
the movie.
podcast.
She don't want to see it. She
Honestly,
gets scared.
super fair. I love that for her.
But yeah, so there is a lot of, just interesting choices made.
Yeah.
I mean, even My Bloody Valentine, they deviate quite a bit from the source material. I think it's a little better.
Yeah, I think that
in the way they deviated, but
was more honest.
Yeah, because in that one they actually changed the identity of the killer in the end.
Yes, I do remember that.
So in the remake, it's Tom Hanniger, who it just goes by TJ in the original. In the remake, he's the killer. That's Jensen Ackles' character.
Yes.
In the original, after Harry Warden, is like, oh no, it's not Harry Warden. He bit it in fucking prison or in, the mental asylum years ago. It's his love interest's boyfriend who's actually the killer in the original.
I do remember that.
That was a fun one.
That was funky.
The 1980s were weird, bro.
Yeah, but like that's what made them fun, and that's why you could create a genre like slasher because they were fun, they were unique. And here's the thing: I feel like now, as we're moving into the modern era, like moving away from the remakes and moving kind of into the legacy sequel and the new generation of slasher.
So this is
They're
where it gets
saying a
fun
lot.
because, do I have a problem? Because I'm going to talk about Scream 4.
You do not have a problem. You may speak about Scream 4.
Of course, because Scream 4, I feel like, everyone talks about how Scream 4 is a commentary on sequels, because it is. On remakes, because it is. But I think Scream 4 is also the legacy sequel before a legacy sequel was really a thing, because it has all of those legacy sequel tropes. We're going to bring in characters from the original to help out the newbies. We're going to have a whole fresh cast of characters that you may or may not like. We're going to have the original cast to come back, help out. They may be in dire straits. They may not. We are going to make fun of the fact that, we're back. Some of us don't want to be here.
Some of us don't. Some of us got a big enough paycheck to come back, is what they're trying to imply.
I'm looking at Harrison Ford.
Oh, Harrison Ford.
Not that he was in Scream, but because
gotta say
that
this,
he
though.
did not want to be in Star Wars.
Exactly. Marvel must have paid him a lot of money that he's so happy to be a Hulk.
Yes.
But yeah, so that kind of moves into our modern genre, and one that we were talking about that's a little debated, but we love to bring it up because it hits that mid-2000s area, is Jennifer's Body. We know this is very debated. It's sometimes considered a slasher by some, but I think it meets a lot of the tropes, don't you? You've got the revenge killer. That's a big part of Jennifer's identity, right?
Revenge killer. She's also unstoppable.
Yes.
Well, until she, doesn't eat for a few days. Which,
Exactly.
honestly, same girl.
And she gets outsmarted, which is a big thing with these villains.
Well, that's a big one for the final girl trope. Like I said, really, you don't have to, but outsmart the killer. But that's how you do it.
Exactly.
That's how these final girls did it, and that's what really is the hallmark of the classic final girl. You outsmart the killer. Needy sat there in the school library doing her fucking research.
I love Needy so much.
I love that for you. But yeah, she sat there doing her research in the school library. How do I kill a succubus demon that possessed my best friend, who's also kind of a bitch?
And even then, we still get the revenge killer because, also spoiler alert, she does kill Jennifer, but Jennifer gets her.
Yeah, Jennifer bites her.
So she actually brings in some new, abilities on her own. And then
she also gets some demon powers, and
she chooses a revenge kill.
Yep, she goes after the band that sacrificed Jennifer to.
Exactly.
Which is also interesting because playing on a lot of those tropes of because playing on a lot of those tropes of you have to stay pure, don't have sex, or you die. The band, they had to sacrifice a virgin. They choose Jennifer thinking she's a virgin. She's not.
Exactly.
And I think because she wasn't a virgin, that actually, they kind of played around with that trope. Because she wasn't a virgin, instead of just dying, that gave her power.
Exactly.
And she was able to use her sex appeal to lure men to their deaths.
And that's what was so fun about it. And, and I think Diablo Cody really set a standard for what the next view of horror was going to be. And I think the most quintessential and y'all in the audience can tell me if I'm wrong, quintessential ending step as we move into the modern era now, we fully are going to move from the 2010s into 2020, has to be the Ty West trilogy.
So for those who don't know, we're talking X, we're talking Pearl, we're talking Maxine.
Exactly. So I know that you love Pearl so much. I also love Pearl and X.
Pearl is me, actually.
I know. And I love this for you. And this is where it comes in. I respect all of her wrongs because I sit there, I'm like, Pearl, this is not a life I think I deserve. And it's true.
Yeah. No. Well, and also it's actually really fun because in X, you're constantly hearing that quote, and she's like, I will not accept a life I do not deserve.
Exactly. And it's
you
true.
You see that line on one of the signs in the beginning of Pearl, which I thought was really fun. It was
really,
a really fun
really
callback.
Smart.
Yeah.
And I think
I love sitting there pointing out the callbacks, and
they're
also
very
sidebar. It made me so mad because I remember watching X and then watching Pearl with someone, and he was like, "Oh, so they're not related at all, right?" And I'm just like,
"Oh God." But
no, and then I had to sit there and explain.
Yeah, you had to explain
that
to him.
It was a prequel. Yeah. That this was the same house. This is the same character. It's played by the same actress which I think was actually really cool. How they had Mia Goth playing Pearl and Maxine.
Yes,
like I was literally. I think I watched it with you.
Yes, you watched.
And you
X
had
with
to. I watched X with you, and you went, and I was sitting there like, how did they do that? Like having Mia Goth, old and young, like next to each other in bed. I'm like, how did they do that? That is so cool.
No, exactly. And as we're getting ready to wrap up this overall evolution, what would you say that trilogy has now brought into where the slasher is going to go and going to continue to go?
Well, I think what's really cool is how it's become almost a character study.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to back up a little bit. X is, in a way, it's a character study on Maxine, which also is going to lead us into Maxine, which unfortunately haven't seen yet. Movie's expensive.
That's okay. In this economy, who knows?
But I've heard it's one of the best movies every time one of those movies comes out, it's the best one. Like all of them.
Agreed.
Yeah. But it's also just a love letter to that schlocky, 70s, like late 70s, early 80s slasher.
So would you call it like back to basics? Like we went all the way through.
Yeah, it is that is a very back to basics kind of slasher. You've got the spectacle. You've got a little bit of that like crazed hillbilly trope, which we didn't get a chance to touch on much, but that's kind of one of the tropes that started with Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Absolutely.
Oh, you got that. You got that really isolated setting. You have a really interesting cast of characters, and also what else is really cool is you have the virgin character who decides to have sex in this movie. And then she bites it.
No, exactly.
And she bites it hard. Like, that sucked.
I think what's good about them seeing this is they realize that it needed to now be made for the folks that love it. And I think that's what really wraps up this history of the slasher genre.
Pearl, because a lot of people will sit there and debate which one is better. They are both very different movies. So X is like pure slasher, blood and gore fest. Pearl, that was X. Pearl is a character study on Mia Goth's character, Pearl.
Yeah.
So, and it's just really interesting, like seeing her, like what ticks her buttons, what pushes her to become a killer, like what is really going on in her head. And you also see, like, hey, guess what? We're supporting women's wrongs. She was always just messed up.
Yeah, but I love this for her.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's now brought the genre to where it needs to be now, is we're exploring more diverse characters. We're doing more diverse character studies, and we're really building that love for the slasher villain. And I think now is the time for some final thoughts, kind of like a final girl, some final thoughts. What do you think, Scarlett, would be your one-sentence wrap-up of everything that the slasher genre has brought to us from beginning to end?
You're asking me to fit that in one sentence?
Yes.
No. I think it's just done. There's so much that I could talk about the slasher genre that, unfortunately, there's no way to fit it in an hour.
Fair.
I think it's just done so much for horror in terms of giving us really fun characters. It's definitely pushed the boundaries of what filmmaking can do, especially if you look at special effects, because I am actually a special effects person at heart. That was my first passion. I am a special effects makeup artist originally by trade. And if you look at a lot of these movies, where, especially back in the day, practical effects was huge.
Yes.
And it really caused people to push what their capabilities were. Like I said, with that cockroach kill in Nightmare 5, you know.
Exactly.
There was a lot of pushing boundaries on what we could do, and I think that's what slashers really brought to the table.
I got to agree with you. And honestly, this was such a fun panel to get to do with you guys. And I'm so proud that this got to be our first live panel here at the Feinics Gate. So thank you guys so much for being here. And this is Lavender signing out. And Scarlett, do you want to say one last goodbye to the audience?
Yes, goodbye, everyone. Thank you so much for having us. I'd like to say a very special thank you to Hudson Valley Horror Fest. Thank you very much to our wonderful audience. Thank you, Lavender, for, helping manage my chaos.
Absolutely.
And,
we'll see you later.
Yes,
Bye.
and thank you to Jade for trusting us to do this.
See you guys later.
Bye.